Dear brothers and sisters, today we will be talking about the power of God and how He can work in our lives in miraculous ways. The story of the floating axe head found in 2 Kings 6 serves as a great example of God's power. In this story, a group of prophets approached the prophet Elisha and asked him for permission to build a larger dwelling for themselves. Elisha agreed, and the prophets went to the Jordan River to cut down trees for the construction. While one of the prophets was cutting down a tree, the axe head flew off the handle and fell into the river. The prophet was distraught because the axe was borrowed, and he couldn't afford to replace it. Elisha asked where the axe head had fallen, and he threw a stick into the water at that spot. Miraculously, the axe head floated to the surface, and the prophet was able to retrieve it. This story highlights 3 important aspects of God's power. Firstly, it shows that God is interested in even the smallest details of our lives. We may think that the loss of an axe head is insignificant, but God cares about our concerns and desires to intervene in our lives. In Matthew 10:29-31, Jesus reminds us that even the sparrows are known and cared for by God, and that we are worth more than many sparrows. Secondly, it shows that God is able to intervene in miraculous ways to help us. When the prophet lost the axe head, he was in a difficult situation. He couldn't afford to replace it, and he needed it to continue his work. However, God was able to intervene and perform a miracle that allowed the prophet to retrieve the axe head. This shows us that we can trust in God to help us when we are in difficult situations. Finally, it shows that God works through people to accomplish His purposes. In this story, Elisha was the instrument through which God performed the miracle of the floating axe head. God often uses people to accomplish His purposes, and we should always be willing to be used by Him. In conclusion, the story of the floating axe head reminds us of the power of God in our lives. He cares about the smallest details of our lives and is able to intervene in miraculous ways to help us. We should always be willing to be used by God to accomplish His purposes. Let us trust in Him and His power to work in our lives. Amen.